Behold, I am now an anime girl. Okay, now that I got this out of my system, let me welcome you to my new video. As you can see, this video will be a bit different than my last videos because I made myself a Live2D vTuber style model. And just to go against the flow, I decided not to use the gold standard for VTubing, which is Live2D cubism. No sir, I wanted to make this entirely with free tools, and so I did. The art for this model was made with StableDiffusion, which is a free generative image AI that can run locally on your machine, GIMP for the image editing, and last but not least, I used Godot 4 for the whole overlay software, wigging, animating, etc. For those who are not aware of what Godot is, it's an open source game engine like Unity. It has less features than Unity and is probably comparable to a 2-year-old version of Unity. But let's be honest, 99% of indie games out there could easily be made on Godot without missing anything critical. So unless you are a trained professional, and even if you are, you should definitely give it a try. So anyways, in this video, I will run you through all the details and technicals of this model. How I arranged the art pieces, the rigging process in Godot, how the animations work, how the overlay software works, including all the code needed for it. And with that, we got ourselves a working software. So without further ado, let me show you what this model can do. Because I have hotkeys for different special animations, like waving. You've seen this before. But I can also act all cutesy. And I can also wink. And I can also be an Italian. But I also have toggles, like the blush you've seen, or I can also do meme faces. And look, there's even a Korean MMO slider. Okay, this is way more fun than I thought it would be. So let's start by analyzing the first sprite sheet for this model, which is the base sprite sheet that I then use to layer clothing on top of it in a separate sprite sheet. We begin by analyzing the body, and this is where I have to apply a little bit of disclaimer, because this model was originally intended for a JRPG, which you can see on the screen now, a little bit of footage. I never finished this, but it helped me learn a few things about animating. So this model is actually an adjustment of the old model. And because of this, I separated the legs and the feet that you probably don't need if you just want to make a VTuber model, because most of the time the legs don't move around much because the focus is on the head. But for a game, definitely do this. You want the dynamic range of separate parts. Same goes for the arms, separating the different parts. Again, for a VTuber model, you probably don't need this. You can put it in one part and it will probably work fine. The hands are separated the palm and the fingers to allow the fingers to be moved around and clip each other individually. And there are also some variations of the hand which have pre-baked finger positions, simply because sometimes you want a completely different hand position that you can't cover with just an open hand rigged like this. For example, my waving animation uses the open hand that you can see on the top right part of this sprite sheet, whereas the resting position that you see now uses the version with the separated fingers so that I can move the fingers around separately. Then there's the back part of their head, the front part of a head. You want them separate because when the character turns her head, then you want the back part to move in one direction and the front part to move in the other direction. Same goes for the ears. Separate them so you can define if they go underneath or on top of the base head, depending on the head position. Then I also made 3 different chest sizes, which is because I wanted this model to work for all of the characters I create in the future for this game. So I needed a higher dynamic range for body types. So I pre-made different sizes so I can just swap out textures in the future and do a little bit of rescaling and not having to worry about re-rigging the model every time I make a new character. So one size fits all, basically. You don't need this if you just want one character and nothing else. Then there are the head, hair, side bangs and front bangs separated because depending on where the character is looking, you want the front bangs to either clip one side but not the other side. So definitely spread this into different parts. Then there's the shadows, which is basically just a copy of the objects that we want to shade, and with brown tinting and a little bit of transparency. And last but not least, we have the facial rig, which is separated a lot in this case because for a vTuber model, you definitely want to apply many cuts and many individually moving parts. But if it's just for a game character that you see mostly from afar, you can make it much easier than this. I would recommend just making the mouth as one texture and exchanging the texture depending on the mouth movement instead of having everything animated individually, because from a distance it won't make much of a difference. This is just needed if you need very close camera views of the face of the character. So upper lips, lower lips, teeth, tongue, inside of her mouth. The skin part under her eye, skin part over her eye, upper eyebrow, lower eyebrow. Then the, those are eyebrows. I don't know what this is called. Eyelashes, right? Eyelashes. Then we have the white part of the eye, the iris, a little bit of shading over the white part of the eye, and exactly the same basically for the right side of the eyes. And this is a mouth overlay I use only for a single vowel, which is the O or U vowel. And this one just gets blended in when the character uses this vowel, because I had a little bit of trouble with this separation creating an O shape for the mouth. So this one is basically there to fix this problem. It's like a pre-baked mouth. And then there are some toggles here, like the tears and the hard eyes and stuff as you've seen before. So this is the first sprite sheet. And a little bit of explanation why I made an extra shoulder part here. This is because you want to sandwich the upper arm between the shoulder and the body texture, because you want the arm to be lower than the shoulder because it's attached behind the front shoulder part, but you want the arm to go on top of the torso, so you need to apply a sandwiched structure here. So basic torso is the lowest layer, arm in front of it, and then cover it up with the shoulder separation layer. So the clothing part is basically a copy of this texture, and then I in-painted over the clothing parts and let StableDiffusion bake them into actual textures. This way I didn't have to re-rig all the clothing parts. I could just keep the rigging I had for the skin parts and maybe extend the vertices a little bit to the outside. So again, we have the chest, we have this collar part, we have the sleeves, we have the basic part of her shirt, we have the red ribbon that she's wearing, we have the individual leg parts and feet. Same wigging as the naked version, so saves time. And then we have the two skirt parts, bottom layer and top layer, and the insides of her sleeves and the collar, because the neck goes in front of the inside of the collar, but the collar goes in front of the neck, so again, a sandwich structure. So, this is how the sprite sheets work. Let's take a look into Godot and see how the rigging works. And here we are in the Godot part of this video. I'm going to show you the structure of the scene that is the main root scene of this software. So we will start with the general structure. First we have the root node, which is node 2D, basically the standard node for a 2D scene in Godot. And there's an audio stream player, which is the main audio node in Godot. And this one holds a master bus, which is basically where you define the input. And this master bus has a microphone input in this case. This also routes into another bus called record, which has a audio effect spectrum analyzer effect attached to it. And this is basically just a frequency spectrum analyzer, just like you know it from like audio players that visualize the frequency spectrum. So we can use this to analyze the frequencies and find out which lip animations to play. Next, we have another node 2D, which holds all the art for the character. And you can see multiple animation players, then all the nodes holding polygons and sprites that we attach to a skeleton. And skeletons are the main node holding all the bones of an object. And the bone structure looks like this if I activate it. And you can see all these sprites that are stitched together from the sprite sheet are mapped to. And as you can see, it's pretty complicated. But don't worry. I started with a very simple bone structure and extended it one after another. So don't worry if it looks a little bit overwhelming at first. So this is basically the structure of this program. Next, we are going to check out the script part of the program. And so I opened the audio stream player node, which holds most of the scripts I'm using. The first is a simple snippet I wrote to detect local peaks. And it has a few math functions, and then basically does apply two filters, an average filter and a standard deviation filter, to find out outliers within a moving mean average. I'm gonna spare details because I noticed that this is over-engineering at its best. When I applied this code to my audio analysis code, I realized that it wasn't much different from just detecting the highest peaks in the audio spectrum, and I ended up not making significant improvements over just straight up sorting the frequency bands by energy and just picking the highest ones. So yeah, you can probably skip this part entirely. The next is the core system, which is this node, and this is basically everything, the entire logic of this software. It has a few arrays holding the frequency data from the audio stream player, and the first part, it basically just prepares a visualizer for debug purposes and finding the right frequency bands. I can quickly enable the debug mode of this program. And you will see it now on screen. This is the debug mode that I wrote. And as you can see, there is like a frequency analyzer. And there is also some data reading out. When you're watching this video, this will be horizontally flipped because the character I made is mostly looking towards the right side of the screen. And when I made these videos, I realized that I want the character to actually look to the left side. So I just flipped the direction of the overlay horizontally. So the character looks to the center of the screen and not to the border of the screen. So these debug infos are nice for me to set up everything, but you don't really need to know what exactly they do. So yeah, frequency analyzer, it works pretty much as you expected. So in this code, I ended up sorting the highest frequency bands with the most energy and just picked the highest energy bands to make judgment on it and say, if I have this frequency band at the highest energy, then this is the letter A. And if I have this frequency band at the highest energy, then this is the letter E, etc. Obviously, this is a very flawed logic and will lead to some errors. But honestly, it's good enough. As I explained before, you probably don't need to approximate the lip flaps too much, simply because even with just some slight decision tree making, you will probably be fine. So I basically just distinguish between an S sound, which shows the teeth of the character. I distinguish between an A sound, an E or I sound with the mouth a little bit more open than for the A, and an O or U sound for basically a circular mouth shape. And then I also have like a half open mouth for everything that doesn't follow into these four categories. And in case the energy is very low in total, I simply close the mouth. So whenever there is no sound coming, the mouth gets closed. And this is basically the decision tree I'm doing here. And as you can see, it's very responsive. And last but not least, I'm doing some averaging over the decisions I make because I run this every frame. So it has a tendency to become very chaotic and apply lots of animation changes within just a couple of milliseconds, which is way too much. So what I do is I keep a backlog of the last decisions and select animations based on what decision was made the most. So if it's like in the last 5 frames, the system decided that it's the vowel A, then the animator will play the lip flaps for the letter A. And if it was a lot of S decisions, then it plays the F, the S animation, etc. So I'm basically averaging over whatever is the result of my calculus. And as you can see here, I am also applying a little bit of a timer so that even if I'm averaging and making a decision based on the average, I still don't want too many lip flap animations to play in close succession. So there's like a delay of 0.1 seconds between each animation to prevent the mouth from just being going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down in within milliseconds. This would look weird. So depending on what vowel or what consonant is being displayed, the time between these animations is a little bit different. So for example, the O or U animation is a little bit has a little bit larger timer applied than, say, the S animation, which plays pretty much instantly because an S is very easy to detect. And an O or U is very hard to detect and has a tendency to blend in with E or A sounds. And last but not least, the closed mouth position has a low timer because I want, whenever the energy is low, the mouth to be closed almost instantly. So this is basically everything. You pick the frequency bands, select which has the most energy, and the most energy determines which vowel animation is to be played. Then we average over our decision. And last but not least, we trigger the animations and apply a little bit of a timer to make sure that the mouth is not moving like a machine gun. So, this is the code part. And there's also a little bit of the script that holds the basic main logic of this program. For example, it keeps references to all the animations players I showed you before. And there's also some key inputs that I'm calculating here. For example, I have a function that allows me to toggle the clothing. I didn't show you this before. And there's also a timer logic that applies a blinking animation for the eyes in random distances, random time intervals, I'm sorry. And this is the input mapping, so I can make key presses to play certain animations. All right, this is basically everything. So the code is very bare bones. There is not a lot of code here. It's just the main logic and the audio analysis code. So this is the basic structure of this program. The next part, we will analyze the animations, and I will say a little bit about the bone structure of the character. And with this, I am opening the main 2D node for the art. And at first, we see lots of animation players holding all the movement and rotation data for the bones that you can see here. The spreads, as I showed you before, and the skeleton. So, as I said before, we're gonna check out the skeleton, and I give you some directions on how to create such a skeleton. First, I started with an origin bone, which is basically below the feet of the character. And from this, I nested the pelvis bone, which is basically the main, the primary bone of the character from which everything else extends. Like a normal human, basically starts from the pelvis and then builds a skeleton upwards and downwards. From the pelvis goes the waist bone, the bone towards the chest area, towards the neck. The head gets another extra bone, and you see from here there are lots of branches to individual bones because the head structure is pretty complicated. But don't worry, you won't need all this when you're just making a game model. But you definitely want a lot of bones if you want to make a VTuber model, because the face is the most important part. So I'm going to show you what I did here. First, I made 2 basic bones for the eye position so that I can move the eyes individually. And from the eyes, extend some sub-bones for the eyes, like this one, which is responsible for scaling the eyelashes downwards for a blink animation. Then there's the same on the other side, so that I can scale the lower part to the top side. And the same for the right eye. There's also another bone holding just the iris, so I can move the iris individually. And then there is the eyebrows, which was just a string of bones, so that I can deform the eyebrows as I wanted. There are bones for the mouth. First, a main bone holding the position of the mouth, and then following that, there are like bones for the bottom lip and the top lip. Again, a string of bones, just like with the eyebrows, so I can deform the mouth just as I see fit. If you're just making a game, you won't need all these bones for the mouth, because it's easier to just exchange textures. Have like a texture for the open mouth, one texture for a closed mouth, and just alternate between 2. From a distance, it doesn't make much of a difference. But for a VTuber model, you definitely want a little bit more sophisticated movements, so I did this here. There are also bones for the nose, just holding the position of the nose. There's a chin bone that I use to spread outwards the outlines for the face, so I can deform the head freely. So if I move this here around, you see that the face can deform. This is very useful because it allows me to make the head as wide or slender as I want, so I can get a 3D effect when the head turns. And then there's a bone holding the root of the ponytail and the hair. There is a bone holding the side bangs, and the side bangs on the other side. There's a bone holding the front bangs, as you can see here. And yes, you basically need bones for all the major hair strands. Outside of the head, there are also some extra bones holding the every moving part of the character. Like, for example, there is a bone holding the chest area, a string of bones falling downwards to give it a little bit of movement. There are also bone strings for every individual fold of the skirt, so I can move those around. And there are also bones for the fingers, so I can move the fingers separately from the palm of the hand. And yes, there are also some helper bones. For example, there's an extra bone here holding the sleeve, so I can move the sleeve individually from the arm, but this is just a very minor detail. So this is the general structure of the skeleton. And as you have probably noticed, there are yellow bones and white bones. The white bones are just regular bones, and the yellow bones have something applied called a skeleton modification stack. And this is basically how you apply dynamic properties to your bones in Godot. For example, there is an IK modification stack that allows me to move around the bones with an IK logic. So if I have this target node for this feet, for example, I can move the target node and the bones will move in a way that has a predefined bend direction and will do the calculus on the bone movement, just like you know from IK systems. So apply these to your legs and your arms. And then there are also these bones here that have a modification stack that is called a jiggle bone. And no, I did not make this up. This is how it's called. Jiggle bones basically are the gravity physics variants of regular bones. They are a bit feature incomplete at the moment because they can only do rotation jiggling so far. So there is no elasticity on these bones. They do not rescale, they just rotate. So to give the chest area a little bit of elasticity, I added another two bones on the lower side, which basically do like an up or downwards motion, and then map the polygons for the chest to the bones rotating left and right, and the bone rotating up or down. So when combining this, I have both elasticity and rotation from the jiggle bones. So I can demonstrate this by moving the character around, and you will immediately see the effect of this. Yeah, these bones are moving up or down, whereas the jiggle bones move sideways to give this area the Gainax physics we expect. Okay, this is the bone structure. Again, put some effort into this. You can thank me later, because it will make animating a lot easier if you do the bone structure right. Okay, so for this next part, I am going to show you how you can map bones to your polygons to move them around. So in this example, I will open the front bangs part of the sprite sheet, and there's this UV button you can click to map the polygons to bones. It's gonna open it, and this is what the window looks like when you click on this button. And as you can see, there are like vertices surrounding the texture part of the sprite sheet that you want, which you do with the point mode. You click on the image to apply points, and then you click on the polygon section of this editor to basically combine multiple points into a single polygon until you get a grid like this. And on the last step, you use the bones tab, sync bones to polygon, and then you have the complete bone structure of your character visible underneath. And you basically select which bone you need this map to. For example, the head bone does not have any reference to these vertices, because I actually applied another bone for like a holder for the front hair, which is front hair base, and then followed by front hair bangs helper. I separated this because it's easier with multiple bones in a chain holding This because it allows me to have different animation players reference these different bones and apply rescaling separately from each other. So this makes blending animations much easier. So, as you can see, the front hair bangs helper bone has influence on these top vertices, and then I like the bones for the left side of the bangs have these vertices. The bone for the middle part has this one, and the right part this one. So you basically map the vertices to the bone that is closest to them, and this way you can move around the individual parts of the polygon, just like you do with 3D animations. I won't go into detail how exactly you do this process, because this is not a tutorial about rigging polygons to bones. You can watch a different tutorial for that from someone like a 3D artist or something. The structure is always the same in every animation program. So yeah, let's go back and continue analyzing the animations. So we have multiple animation players here. I'm gonna show you what they do. I separated animations into different categories to allow me to play animations from each player individually. For example, this is the head X animation, which means I have an animation here that allows me to turn the head left or right. So I can move this here around, and you see the head turning. So all the bones move individually based on the play position of this animation, and then I can do left and right movement of the head by just adjusting the play position of this animation, which is pretty neat. Then there is the head animation player for a basic tilt, left and right. This is very simple. It just moves a neck bone around, and that's all. As you can see, there's only one bone attached to this animation, so this is bare bones. I made a pun. Then there is the animation player holding all the body animations. So there's like this gesture that I showed you before. And there's the animation where she's plugging her skirt. And then there's the waving animation, etc. So everything you want the character to move around, you get individual animation. There are the different stand animations, etc. that play at random. Nothing special here. There's also a pretty large blend time applied here. As you can see, almost 2 seconds blending between the animations, just so the movement is very smooth. Okay, this is the body animations. Then there's an animation player that I use just for the culture slider. That just rescales the bones for the chest area and exchanges a few textures, etc. There is an eye animation player, which is very important, because this one holds all the different eye variations I have. So like this and this, etc. They also have a blink animation, every of these animations. And then there are also some neutral animations. The first one is the regular blink. The second one is like a longer animation, just moving around the eyelashes a little bit to give it a little bit more variation. And there's another one that applies a blink and moves the eyelashes a bit to give the eye a little more natural feel. Then I have a mouth animation player that I use to trigger different mouth positions. These are just still frames. And the movement of the bones is actually not designed in this player, but the blending between these animations will move these bones dynamically. So we just need still frames for this. We don't need to animate anything about this, which is neat. There are also different rhythms, or vowels and consonants. I basically only used A, E, O, S, and last but not least, a half-open position for everything else that wasn't detectable. And this already gives you very dynamic mouth movements, so this is more than enough. And everything you apply additionally is probably going into diminishing returns. So don't overdo it, like me. 5 basic rhythms, and you got it. This one I show just because I want. And then there's an extra animation player that I use to trigger like the blush and tears, the hard eyes, etc. Yeah, and I can mix and match. For example, I can move the head to the right and at the same time tilt it to the left. And also apply like this eye animation, and on top of it I apply the blush or the hard eyes, etc. And we are at the last part of this video, putting it all together. So let's go to Project and open the project settings. This is the window that pops up when doing this. And as you can see, there are some settings here that you can enable with advanced settings on the top right. And you basically want to apply the correct window size for the overlay, and you want it to be transparent. So let's select the transparent option, which makes the background of the window from the software transparent, so you can overlay it while you are doing something else on screen, etc. There are multiple options here. The most important one is the transparency option, so you don't need to apply a green screen effect, which is neat. And always on top is also important, because you don't want the window to be unselected every time you focus another window. So there are also some settings here for the audio buses, the drivers, etc. Everything important. To be honest, I didn't touch most of these. What's important is the input mapping, which allows me to apply hotkeys. For example, I use the keypad numbers to trigger different animations. And this is a little bit a caveat of using a game software as an overlay, because the problem is Windows doesn't allow key input for applications that are not in focus. So whenever I want to play an animation on this overlay, I first need to focus the window by clicking on it. So I need to move the mouse right, click on the overlay, and then I can like trigger this animation. If I was just in Godot or in whatever program I currently have open, and I would just use the hotkeys, then nothing would happen, because hotkeys only go to focus windows. I know that there are possibly ways to hack this in and like do some mouse macros or something, but honestly, there's an easier solution, which is using a gamepad, because gamepad inputs can be mapped directly to a window and don't need focus. So I basically just hooked up an USB controller and press a button whenever I wanted to. It's basically the dollar store version of Steam Deck. So, yeah, last but not least, you can compile the stuff and you're done with your own VTube Studio thing with a Live2D model. Awesome. Wow, this has been so far my longest video. I hope you liked it, and if not, then at least you listened to my ramblings, which is also nice. Consider dropping a like and a subscription, because it would give me the exposure to get this channel monetized in the future, which is one of my goals so far. And you can do your part. Also, if you don't know, because you just tuned in for the Godot part and don't care about my AI stuff, then maybe you can check out my Dojin. Link is in the description below, or at least the number to find this on Pixiv, because I would rather not post the link directly, because it's highly not safe for work. Yeah. Proceed with caution. So anyways, that's it for today, and I wish you all a nice evening, or morning, or whenever you are listening to this. So, Loot Garlic out.